Hello and welcome to the Source One podcast. Consider us your source for the latest procurement, supply management, and strategic sourcing insights, anytime, anywhere.
So you guys recently published a blog series on intergenerational communication in procurement. Jen, what do you think when you hear the word millennial?
I think, unfortunately, at this point in 2018, it's got a lot of negative connotation tied to it. That when people use it, they're not using it in a positive light. They're usually using it to maybe put down the generation, the younger generation, and classify them. I think what you'll also find is, when you say it to a millennial, they get offended for that reason.
Yeah, exactly.
It turns into sort of an insult when you use the term, because even when I was writing my article, I'm thinking, I'm insulting people. But really, it's like any other generational tag that we've used over the time, Gen X and Gen Y, and until we started using the term millennial, it wasn't an insult to classify a generation, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has become almost a slur at
Yeah.
this point. Claire, as a millennial yourself, what do you think of the term? Do you find it's loaded like that?
Definitely. I feel like there are so many negative stereotypes that are associated with the name, with the word millennial. But I think that if you just take a different perspective on it, you can definitely say that it's like a conversation starter. Why are we classified as millennials, and why have we achieved those kind of stereotypes? Maybe because of we lived through a defining events that kind of transform the way we live, and that has an impact on the way that we as millennials interact with everyone else.
So obviously the kind of influx of millennial talent is a hot topic in just about every field. It seems like every third procurement blog I read is sort of what do millennials mean for the business. How have you seen, Jen, millennials start to influence procurement and supply management? Do you agree that the industry's future depends on them?
Right. I think when you hear topics like that in blogs and conversations, the other thing you're hearing right at the same time is the baby boomers are leaving and the millennials are coming in. So in the same respect, I think people are being tagged with this generational classification. But when we look at a procurement department or sourcing department, you're seeing a mix of those two generations. So I don't want to say that the industry depends solely on millennials, but I wouldn't say it depends solely on the baby boomers either. I think really it's about how they collaborate to build a stronger future, because what we're seeing from the millennials is bringing a fresh perspective, taking technology to a whole new level, and not just applying it, but how they use it, looking at it from more of an out-of-the-box type of a standpoint, and then almost educating the baby boomers on ways that they can do things better. But you really want to see those older generations teaching the newer generations about the right way to do things from a process standpoint, because unfortunately one of the connotations that we see with millennials is I want it now. And I think one of the attributes that they need to learn a little bit more is patience, that some things come from just taking the time to do things slowly and do them right, and not just expecting results instantly.
I guess on the subject of negative stereotypes, Claire, do you think millennials in the workplace ever do live up to some of those negative stereotypes?
Absolutely. Sadly, for sure, because I know that the stereotypes in the workplace, some of them would be, for instance, being narcissistic, being socially awkward, and all of that stems from the fact that we kind of are a generation where we're the Peter Pan generation, where we live longer with our parents, and we have them so ever present in our lives. That can definitely be a huge turn off, so it might be very difficult to transition to that interaction in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what unique skills do you think millennials have for procurement and supply management purposes?
So the most obvious one I would think is technology, that we are so adaptable to technology. We're able to pick up on those kind of things. We have grown up with it, and we have seen new things come up, for instance the iPhones and the iPads and everything like that. With procurement, we're always looking at data and managing data and analyzing it, and that's something that millennials can definitely take advantage of.
Mm-hmm. Jen, what else has impressed you about millennials in procurement? How have you seen them contribute to the industry thus far? What skills do they seem to be coming to the table with?
Sure. So I think, when it does come to analytics, there's a whole new perspective there, because with that mindset of being results oriented, and there's two ways to look at that, right? Like, yes, they want results now, but I look at that from a positive perspective, that they want results. And that's something I definitely see as an incredibly ambitious generation. Again, I'd like to be a little bit more patient, but at the same time, the motivations for that in patience are what inspire me, I think. And I think that inspires other people as well. A process that we're looking at would typically take 6 to 8 weeks, maybe. A millennial might come in and say, we can do this in 3 to 4 weeks, and this is how we can do it. So it's not cutting corners, it's just creating a lot of efficiencies that maybe we didn't see before.
And Claire, in addition to the kind of tech savvy quality of millennials, what else do you think they can teach veterans in procurement and supply management?
I would say that we're always constantly connected, and that's something that people might not think that is important, especially like we're like stuck, like jobs are usually 9 to 5, and when you get home you don't even think about doing jobs anymore. But as a millennial, you're always connected to your devices and you're always checking your emails, and so the lines of communication are always open, even regardless. And so staying like that kind of like transparency, I think, is like super important too, and that kind of like connection is something that I think that anyone can learn, not just like veterans in the industry. I think it's like something that we should be comfortable with, just being able to like have an open like dialogue.
That is interesting too, because I think you make a really good point that we've turned the typical workday from 9 to 5 to 24/7. There's good and bad things about that, right? I think what we're finding is that the younger generations get burnt out a lot quicker because they don't know when to put work down and move to personal. And when you have work constantly in your hand, I'm definitely casualty of that myself. If I get an email at 9 o'clock at night, I'm answering the email because why not? I can.
Yeah.
But that causes a lot of problems too. That there's no work-life balance. They lose sight of that too.
But then on the flip side of that, I know you mentioned about us having like kind of like a go-getter kind of enthusiastic attitude, that we just want to get things done, we're results oriented. I agree with you. We do sometimes struggle with work-life balance, and that's like something we look for in like any job, I think.
In addition to collaborating with veterans in the industry, how else would you recommend millennials go about improving the skills that they could use some improvement on?
Sure, I think there's a lot of different training avenues that you can investigate, and that's another element that we're seeing a lot of transitions and evolution in the training platforms, where historically it was all instructor-led. You sit in a classroom and someone talks at you all day. And we found that over time, for anyone, that's not effective. So that's another element that's helped us with blended formats, that you can do these short, again, millennials have a shorter attention span, right? Shorter YouTube style trainings where it's 10-minute blips on a topic. You learn the topic, you go and apply the concept, you come back and learn another topic. There's just other elements like that that are bleeding through to training elements and how we work, so that we're not being pulled down by these laborious trainings and things like that. That's one really good way. I think mentor programs are really good too. I think that's one of the things that we're losing, is more and more individuals in the older generations are leaving the workforce. They're taking with them all that tribal knowledge. And there's no opportunity to really transition those skills and capabilities to the new generation.
Claire, what have you found helpful in helping you sort of build the professional skills that are sometimes lacking in our generation of professionals?
I think what Jen said like speaks to me about finding like a mentor, just helping you like transition and getting used to like the workplace. Like there are things that work and there are things that can make working easier for you, especially as a millennial. Like you don't have that kind of real world skills and knowledge to like adapt to things, because you're always, as a millennial, you've been stuck in like education. You go to college, and at the point after we exit college, some of us don't even have that real life experience. And so like transitioning is really hard. So I feel like I've been able to grow out of it by finding like the mentors, like my supervisors who are open, and interacting with people who I think are closer to me in age, which are easier to relate to, or those who have like kind of like a young feel, like vibe or feel, and I feel like that makes them more relatable to me.
And Jen, in your opinion, do you think organizations are doing enough to kind of build that spirit of intergenerational collaboration? Do you think mentorship programs are as popular as they ought to be?
In some places, yes. Bigger organizations that have the funding to do that sort of thing, I think that's where I see it. In small organizations, no. But even in some more recent procurement surveys, questioning the C-suite as to what they're doing, that there's a big focus on the lack of skills and capabilities in our generation, but they're also, on the flip side, when they're asked questions about what are you doing for training and what are you doing to build those skills, nothing. They're not putting the time and effort into training people. They know we don't have the skills, but we're not going to train you on it either. So it's really, it's sad. I think a lot of organizations are not doing enough, but at the same time, they have so many other priorities with the digitalization, a lot of other transformations going on in this particular industry that the talent element is not focused on as much as it should be. And that's just going to be, in a few years, they're going to look back and say, oh, well, now we got to fix this.
Right.
I mean, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because like there is another stereotype associated with millennials, which is like our tendency for flightiness. Like we don't stay in one field for too long, and so that's why maybe C-suite like executives don't want to invest that time and energy just because we know that they might not stick around so long, so this investment is not going to take them anywhere. But I think that building that foundation that you talked about, like I think that's important too, to make and having like an open mind, like that would allow us to be more inclined to stay.
Yeah, and it's looking for more cost-effective options. Like a mentorship program shouldn't cost that much, as opposed to training. So there's definitely ways to look at it and approach it so that you're not putting a huge investment out there. Because I totally understand that. It's a big concern for recruiting managers.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's, in a weird way, kind of an example, though, of where a negative quality of millennials can be flipped into a positive, because if companies, as a way of responding to millennials being flighty or being, unfaithful to their employer, if their response to that is, we need to invest in these retention programs, we need to invest in making sure we're mentoring people, we need to, provide whatever incentives will work, I mean, I think that ends up being a positive good for kind of all parties involved, right? I mean, millennials kind of grow out of a not so great quality, and these businesses develop stronger talent management programs.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Claire, do you think most millennials are willing to admit that they've still got things to learn?
Well, I know I've said before that millennials do have this kind of like sense of cockiness and like self-entitlement, and so like having that, they could be a little bit difficult to admit their faults, but I think that's something that is necessary to happen, especially in the feedback conversations. Like I'm sure if it's presented in a positive way, like we'd be able to like understand and see what we did wrong. And I think that we wouldn't dwell on it too long, but we would try to like change ourselves to make ourselves like have a positive image.
Yeah, and I think it's actually an important consideration as a person who manages people's careers, and I've been doing this for a long time, that need for constant feedback. On the one hand, it's a little frustrating for managers because we feel like we have to constantly micromanage millennials. On the other hand, it's given us the opportunity to take another look at how we approach this process. That, when I started even here at Source One, it was very little feedback. You were on your own, you learned on your own, and we certainly came up very well. It was a great process, but at the same time, it would have been nice to have a little bit more feedback. So now we understand that we can't keep with that old mindset and still be able to recruit top talent. So we've had to sort of meet in the middle and adjust our process, even, a little bit begrudgingly, but being able to give more feedback to help you grow, but at the same time, cutting the leash a little bit so that you have the opportunity to see how you can grow on your own.
You've been listening to the Source One podcast. For more strategic sourcing and procurement insights every day, visit our blog, The Strategic Sorcerer. Want to provide feedback or suggest a topic for a future episode? Let us know at prrequest@sourceoneinc.com. Thanks for listening.